We all know how confusing it can feel to deal with someone who pulls away just when you start to get close. One moment, they're warm and affectionate, and the next, it feels like they've disappeared into their shell. But here's the truth: avoidants aren't immune to love, and they're not incapable of commitment. What they respond to isn't chasing, convincing, or proving your worth. It's a single powerful boundary that makes them feel safe, respected, and ultimately fall in love forever. The power of boundaries is often misunderstood, especially in relationships where one person leans toward avoidance. Many people believe that if they want an avoidant partner to open up and commit, they need to be endlessly patient, forgiving, and accommodating. They think that if they can just be kind enough, understanding enough, or flexible enough, the avoidant will eventually see their worth and stay. But that isn't what actually creates love or trust. What truly impacts an avoidant at a deep level is the presence of strong, healthy boundaries. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are the lines that define what you accept, what you value, and how you expect to be treated. When someone consistently upholds their boundaries, it sends a clear signal: I know who I am, I respect myself, and I won't allow anyone to diminish my worth. This is magnetic to avoidants because it is something they rarely experience in relationships. Most avoidants are used to partners who bend over backwards for them. They've seen people try to earn their affection by overgiving, by tolerating neglect, or by ignoring their own needs just to keep the relationship alive. That pattern only reinforces the avoidant's belief that intimacy is dangerous and that closeness will always end in suffocation or control. But when someone shows up with a different energy, an energy of self-respect, they disrupt that belief. They create a new experience where the avoidant realizes that love does not have to mean losing themselves or being trapped. Instead, it can mean connecting with someone who knows how to stand firm, who values their own emotional health, and who refuses to accept treatment that undermines their dignity. Boundaries communicate safety in a way that no amount of words can. You can tell someone you respect yourself, but when you actually demonstrate it by setting limits and sticking to them, it creates a shift in the dynamic. An avoidant who is used to others chasing suddenly finds themselves slowing down and taking notice. They realize they can't play the same disappearing act without consequences. They see that this is not a person they can manipulate with silence or inconsistency. Instead, they are faced with the reality that if they want to stay in this relationship, they have to show up differently. That realization can be uncomfortable for them at first, but it is also the very thing that makes them feel safe enough to begin opening up. Boundaries are powerful because they flip the script. Instead of making the avoidant the one who dictates the rhythm of closeness and distance, it places you in control of your emotional world. You are no longer waiting, hoping, or convincing. You are choosing, deciding, and leading. That energy of leadership is incredibly attractive, not because it dominates the avoidant, but because it reassures them. It tells them they are with someone who won't collapse under pressure, who won't lose themselves trying to earn love, and who won't settle for anything less than genuine connection. Self-respect is one of the most magnetic qualities a person can embody, and when it comes to relationships with avoidance, it is often the deciding factor in whether they stay distant or begin to invest emotionally. Many people misunderstand attraction in these situations. They think attraction is about showing someone how much they're willing to give, how endlessly forgiving they can be, or how deeply they're willing to prove their loyalty. But what actually draws an avoidant in is when they encounter someone who does not waver on their sense of worth. Self-respect communicates a level of strength and stability that makes the avoidant feel like they are dealing with someone different from anyone they've met before. It sends the message that you are not there to play games, that your value does not depend on their approval, and that your life and happiness are not defined by their presence. An avoidant partner often expects others to bend, to adjust, and to wait around while they decide how much of themselves they are willing to give. They are used to people trying to fill in the gaps of their inconsistency by giving more. They expect that their distance will be met with pursuit, that their silence will be met with anxious questions, and that their coldness will be compensated by someone else's warmth. But when they meet a person who carries genuine self-respect, the cycle breaks. The avoidant suddenly realizes they cannot take the same liberties because this person won't chase, won't beg, and won't compromise their standards just to hold the relationship together. That realization doesn't repel them. It draws them in because it communicates strength. There is a paradox at play here. Many assume that avoidants are looking for weakness so they can control or distance themselves, but in reality, weakness makes them feel unsafe. When someone abandons their own needs to earn love, it triggers the avoidant's fear that intimacy will always mean pressure and imbalance. Self-respect, however, tells them the opposite story. It shows that closeness does not mean losing yourself, and it proves that love can exist with strength on both sides. When you demonstrate self-respect through your words, your choices, and your boundaries, you provide a kind of security that the avoidant cannot find in other relationships. The impact of self-respect is not in grand speeches, but in the small, consistent actions that make it clear you know your worth. It's in not tolerating disrespect disguised as distance. It's in not rearranging your whole life around someone who is undecided about you. It's in showing that you can enjoy your life fully with or without their participation, which removes the power dynamic they are used to controlling. That calm self-assurance can feel foreign to an avoidant at first, but it is also what eventually allows them to relax. They begin to sense that they are with someone who doesn't need them but chooses them, and that distinction transforms the way they show up. It encourages them to lean in, to trust, and to value the relationship more deeply than they ever would with someone who is willing to trade self-respect for closeness. Emotional consistency is one of the most important qualities that creates trust in any relationship, but it becomes even more vital when dealing with avoidance. For someone who has built their walls high to protect themselves from vulnerability, inconsistency feels like a confirmation of their worst fears. They already believe that closeness leads to disappointment or suffocation. So when the person they're with becomes unpredictable in their love or in their reactions, it reinforces their instinct to retreat. On the other hand, when you bring steady emotional consistency into the relationship, you send a very different signal. You show that you are not here to play games, that you won't punish them with silence, and that your love isn't dependent on their perfect behavior in every moment. That steadiness becomes a quiet force that slowly disarms their defenses. Consistency doesn't mean tolerating bad behavior or ignoring when your needs are not being met. It means that when you express your needs, you do it calmly and clearly rather than through ultimatums or manipulation. It means that when they pull back, you don't collapse into panic or swing into desperate overgiving. Instead, you hold your ground and show that your emotional world is stable, regardless of their fluctuations. That steadiness is deeply attractive to an avoidant because it offers something they rarely experience: the sense that connection can exist without chaos. Avoidants often expect emotional roller coasters from relationships. They anticipate that their pulling away will lead to an emotional explosion, desperate chasing, or guilt-driven pressure from the other person. When that doesn't happen, when instead they are met with composure and a balanced response, it creates a kind of safety that begins to soften their resistance. They start to recognize that intimacy with you doesn't mean losing their space, and it doesn't mean being drowned in emotional waves they can't handle. Instead, it means being with someone who can handle their own emotions and remain steady even when things are uncertain. This consistency also communicates a deeper message about self-worth. When you are emotionally consistent, you show that you don't abandon yourself just because someone else is struggling. You continue to operate from your values, from your standards, and from your vision of what love should look like. That not only builds respect, but also admiration. An avoidant may have encountered people who shift their entire identity to accommodate them, but when they see someone who remains grounded and steady, They feel an unfamiliar pull toward that energy. It feels reliable, and reliability is what transforms casual attraction into lasting connection. Emotional consistency doesn't mean being emotionless. It doesn't mean hiding how you feel or pretending you're unaffected. It means expressing your emotions in a way that is clear, calm, and respectful of yourself. It means not turning every conflict into a catastrophe and not letting fear dictate your reactions. It's the rhythm of stability that slowly teaches the avoidant that love can be safe, predictable in the best way, and free from the turbulence they associate with closeness. When that realization sinks in, they no longer see consistency as boring. They see it as the very thing that allows them to finally let their guard down. No tolerance for disrespect is one of the most powerful boundaries you can set, especially when dealing with avoidance. Many people in relationships with avoidance end up excusing or normalizing behaviors that undermine their self-worth. They tell themselves it's just the way the avoidant is, that pulling away, stonewalling, or dismissing feelings is part of their personality, and that if they want the relationship to work, they have to put up with it. But in reality, every time you tolerate disrespect, you teach the avoidant that their behavior has no consequences. You communicate, even unintentionally, that they can treat you however they want, and you'll still remain. This not only erodes your self-esteem, but also keeps the avoidant stuck in patterns that prevent real intimacy from forming. The moment you decide that you will no longer tolerate disrespect, the entire dynamic shifts. Disrespect doesn't just mean outright cruelty. It can show up in more subtle ways, like canceling plans without explanation, ignoring messages for days, dismissing your feelings, or constantly pulling away whenever things get too close. When you allow those behaviors repeatedly, you are silently agreeing to a relationship where your needs and emotions don't matter. But when you calmly set the boundary that these patterns are not acceptable, you establish a new standard. You show the avoidant that while you care about them, you care about yourself enough not to accept treatment that devalues you. What makes this boundary so powerful is that it forces the avoidant to confront the truth about their actions. Avoidants often assume that others will adjust to their behavior, and many people do because they're afraid of losing the connection. But when they meet someone who doesn't tolerate disrespect, they are faced with a rare situation: either step up or lose the relationship. This doesn't make them feel trapped, as some might fear. Instead, it makes them feel respected. They realize they are with someone who knows their value and won't compromise it. That level of strength creates a sense of safety because the avoidant begins to trust that if you say you care, it's genuine and not driven by desperation or fear of abandonment. Holding this boundary also teaches the avoidant something they've often never learned in past relationships: that love can coexist with accountability. It shows them that connection doesn't mean one person giving endlessly while the other takes. It creates balance where both people's needs matter and where respect is the foundation rather than an afterthought. When you communicate clearly that you won't tolerate disrespect and you actually follow through by stepping back when it happens, you're not punishing them. You're protecting your self-worth. That action in itself is profoundly attractive because it demonstrates inner strength. Avoidants are used to people bending under the pressure of their distance. But when you remain firm, they start to see you differently. They see someone who won't sacrifice dignity for closeness, someone who can walk away rather than stay in something unhealthy, and someone who understands that real love is built on mutual respect. This boundary doesn't push them away, it draws them closer because it makes them realize they cannot take you for granted and that you will only stay in a relationship where respect is present on both sides. Space with security is one of the most delicate yet powerful balances you can create in a relationship with an avoidant. Avoidants fear losing themselves in closeness, so they instinctively pull away when intimacy feels overwhelming. At the same time, they also crave connection and want to feel loved, but the way they seek it often looks like distance, which can be confusing for their partner. The key is learning how to give them the freedom they need without sacrificing your own needs or sense of worth. That balance between allowing space and holding onto security creates a dynamic that feels both safe and magnetic to them. When you allow space, you communicate that you are not afraid of their independence. You show that you do not see their need for solitude or time apart as a threat, and that you are confident enough in yourself and in the connection to let them breathe. This is incredibly important for avoidants, because so much of their fear comes from the belief that being close means being consumed. By not panicking when they take space, you prove that intimacy does not have to equal suffocation. But the real magic happens when you pair that freedom with unwavering security. Security means that while you respect their need for distance, you also uphold the standards of how you want to be treated. It means you don't allow space to become neglect, silence, or disregard for your needs. For example, if they pull away, you don't chase them endlessly or demand constant reassurance, but you also don't disappear into the background hoping they'll eventually return. Instead, you make it clear through your actions that space is fine, but disrespect or prolonged avoidance isn't. You continue living your life fully, staying consistent with your boundaries and values, which creates the impression that your world does not collapse without their presence. This combination of giving freedom while maintaining your self-respect changes the way the avoidant views you. They see that you are not trying to control them, but they also see that you are not controlled by them. This balance creates trust in a way few other things can. For someone who has always associated closeness with pressure, you are showing them a new reality. Closeness with you comes with breathing room. At the same time, for someone who expects their distance to be endlessly tolerated, you are also showing them that love requires consistency and respect. That paradox is exactly what makes them begin to relax into the relationship rather than resist it. They realize that they can have both freedom and connection, both individuality and intimacy, which is something they secretly desire but rarely believe is possible. Over time, this dynamic shifts the avoidant's perspective on love. They begin to see you as someone who understands them on a level that others don't. They recognize that you can offer them a connection where they don't feel trapped, and yet they also can't get away with unhealthy patterns. That mix of freedom and accountability builds a deeper kind of trust. It shows them that being close to you won't cost them their independence, and that giving you security won't cost them their identity. This is the balance that allows avoidants to finally lower their guard and start investing fully, because they no longer feel they have to choose between love and freedom. The forever effect begins the moment an avoidant realizes you are not like the people they have been with in the past. Most of their relationships follow a pattern where their distance triggers pursuit, where their inconsistency is tolerated, and where their emotional walls are either ignored or tiptoed around. This dynamic reassures them temporarily that they can keep control, but it never creates the safety required for real love to grow. When you break this cycle by refusing to chase, by holding on to your boundaries, and by staying calm instead of collapsing under pressure, something shifts. They see that you are not willing to abandon yourself to earn their affection. And that revelation plants the seed of long-term attraction and respect. For an avoidant, falling in love forever isn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It's about trust built over time through consistent boundaries. When they notice that you don't flinch when they pull back, that you don't beg for scraps of attention, and that you won't accept a relationship where your needs are neglected, they start to relax into the connection. At first, this may even feel unsettling for them because it's unfamiliar. They are used to having the upper hand, to setting the pace, to controlling how much intimacy is allowed. But with you, the balance shifts. Your refusal to overextend or settle makes them confront the reality that if they want to keep you, they have to rise to meet your standards. What makes this effect so lasting is that it doesn't just create attraction, it creates reverence. They stop seeing you as someone who could be taken for granted and start seeing you as someone who commands respect through the way you carry yourself. That respect slowly deepens into admiration, and admiration deepens into love. Unlike fleeting passion, this type of love doesn't fade because it is rooted in how they view you at the core level. They come to see you as the person who challenged their old patterns, who showed them that love can exist without control, and who never wavered on self-worth no matter what tests they put you through. The forever effect also works because it makes you unforgettable. People who abandon their boundaries tend to blur together in the avoidance memory because the relationships all follow the same script of pursuit, disappointment, and withdrawal. But the person who stood firm, who knew what they deserved, and who didn't collapse under the pressure of distance stands out permanently. Even if they try to walk away, they will find themselves comparing everyone else to the standard you set. No one else feels quite as strong, as safe, or as real because no one else made them feel both free and accountable at the same time. This lasting impact doesn't mean they are suddenly perfect or that they will never struggle with their avoidant tendencies again.